So here's the thing about the Galactic Council. When they panic, they really commit to it. We're talking full theatrical production, emergency broadcasts across 17,000 star systems, the works. And on this particular Tuesday, because apparently the universe has a sense of humor, they were losing their collective minds over what they kept calling the Terran Death Beast. The broadcast opened with Ambassador Cleithna, this four-armed slug-looking fellow who normally handled trade disputes, and he looked like he was about 3 seconds away from a stress-induced molt. His skin had gone from its usual pleasant purple to something closer to panic-stricken gray. "Citizens of the Galactic Union," he wheezed into the camera, all 4 hands gripping the podium like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "We face an unprecedented crisis. The apex predator, specimen classified as Terra Omega-7, has escaped containment at the Xerion Maximum Security Xenozoology Facility." Now, for context, the Xerion facility was where the galaxy kept things that could eat through starship hulls. Things with acid blood, things with 17 rows of teeth and attitudes to match. This was not the kind of place you escaped from by accident. The broadcast cut to shaky footage from the facility's security cameras, all weird angles and grainy green night vision nonsense. You could see scientists, at least I think they were scientists, running in every direction like someone had just announced free samples at the food court. One of them literally threw his data pad at a wall and just kept sprinting. "The creature possesses retractable combat claws," Cleithna continued, and I swear his voice went up an octave. "Reflective night vision optics, allowing for perfect low-light predation. Auditory sensors capable of detecting prey from extreme distances. And perhaps most terrifying, a distinctive vocal projection that has been known to paralyze victims with fear." They played an audio clip. Even through the radio static and dramatic music they'd added, because of course they added dramatic music, you could hear it. A low, rumbling sort of sound that apparently had the entire Galactic Council ready to declare martial law. The kicker? The thing had last been spotted heading toward the agricultural colonies in the Terran expansion zone, which meant it was heading toward Earth-settled worlds. Which meant, and here's where it gets really good, it was heading straight toward guys like me. My name's Dale Pritchard, and I grow soybeans on a colony world that's so boring they just named it Agriculture Station 12. Yeah, real creative. I'd been out here for 6 years, and the most exciting thing that had happened was when my tractor broke down during harvest season, and I had to fix it with duct tape and what I'm pretty sure was spite. I was about 40 rows deep into the north field, checking irrigation lines, when I heard the broadcast on my comm unit. Listened to the whole thing while I was elbow deep in mud, trying to unclog a filter that had decided today was a good day to quit. Terran Death Beast. Right. Sure. I'd heard this song and dance before. 3 years back, the Council had a meltdown over Earth's venomous serpents after some idiot tried to smuggle a garden snake through customs. Turned out most of the galaxy had never evolved anything poisonous, so they thought we were all walking around with biological weapons in our backyards. Which, to be fair, I guess we kind of were. But still, I finished with the filter, wiped my hands on my jeans, which were already 70% mud anyway, and headed back toward the house. That's when I saw them. 3 ships, proper military-grade vessels, coming in way too fast for a casual visit. They left scorch marks on my upper field when they landed. I stood there, coffee mug in one hand, watching a full tactical team deploy from the lead ship like they were storming a beachhead. Guys in armor, carrying weapons that hummed with the kind of energy that said, "We're compensating for something." The team leader spotted me and started jogging over, which looked ridiculous because he was wearing enough tactical gear to invade a small moon. "Sir," he shouted, still 20 feet away. "Sir, you need to evacuate immediately. There's a Class 5 predator loose in this sector." I took a sip of my coffee. It had gone cold. "Yeah, I heard the broadcast." "Then you understand the severity. I understand you just landed on my soybean field." The team leader pulled off his helmet, and I got my first good look at him. Reptilian features, scales that shifted between green and blue depending on how the light hit them, and eyes that had way too many eyelids for my comfort. He looked like someone had crossed an iguana with a middle manager and given it a military complex. "Commander Valtrix, Galactic Emergency Response Division," he said, like he expected me to salute or something. "And your crops are the least of our concerns right now, citizen. We're tracking a lethal organism that was last detected within 15 kilometers of this location." 15 kilometers, I repeated. "So, not here." "Not yet," piped up a smaller alien who'd been hiding behind Valtrix. This one looked like somebody had started to draw a stick figure, got bored, and decided to make it purple. But the creature's movement patterns suggest it's established a den nearby. "I'm Pip, xenobiologist, And I've been studying this specimen for 3 months before it escaped. Pip was shaking, actually trembling, over something that was possibly, in the general area. Okay, I said slowly. So what exactly are we dealing with here? Because the broadcast made it sound like you lost a tank with teeth. Valtrix's scales did this weird rippling thing that I think meant he was trying to look impressive. The specimen is approximately 0.4 meters at shoulder height, roughly. 4.5 kilograms of pure predatory evolution. It possesses weapons-grade keratin protrusions on all 4 limbs, capable of extending and retracting at will. I blinked. You're describing something the size of a house cat. I don't know what a house cat is, Pip said, pulling out a data pad with trembling hands. But this creature is an apex killer. Look at these specifications. Binocular forward, facing eyes for tracking prey, independently rotating auditory sensors. And the teeth. Oh, the teeth. Rows of specialized cutting and tearing instruments designed for… Yeah, carnivore. I get it, I interrupted. Listen, guys, I appreciate the concern, but I've got irrigation to finish and… Sir. Valtrix stepped closer, and his voice dropped to what I think he thought was an intimidating register. This creature killed a security drone with a single strike. Breached 3 levels of containment. We found claw marks on a Durasteel door. This is not a drill. This is not an exaggeration. If you've seen anything unusual, any signs of predation, unexplained noises, missing livestock… Well, I said, because apparently I hate my own peaceful existence. I mean, something did get into my barn last week and knocked over a bag of feed. You'd think I'd just announced the apocalypse. Pip actually yelped. Valtrix's hand went to his weapon, and the rest of his team suddenly looked very interested in my barn, which was about 50 yards behind the house and looked exactly like what it was. A slightly run-down building that housed my equipment and not much else. Show us, Valtrix demanded. Now. I sighed and started walking toward the barn, already regretting every decision that had led me to this moment. You know, you guys are gonna feel real silly in about 30 seconds. We were halfway to the barn when I heard it. That low, rumbling sound from the broadcast, the one that had apparently been known to paralyze victims with fear. Pip made a noise that I can only describe as a squeak crossed with a whimper, and the entire tactical team raised their weapons. That's the vocalization, Pip whispered, like speaking too loud might wake up something worse. That's the territorial threat call. Oh no. Oh no, no, no. That's Carl, I said flatly. He's purring because it's almost dinner time. Valtrix's scales went rigid. What is Carl? My cat. I kept walking toward the barn. He's a barn cat, lives out here, eats mice, sleeps about 18 hours a day, pretty standard cat stuff. I slid open the barn door, and there he was. Carl. Orange tabby, maybe 7 years old, sitting on top of a hay bale like he owned the place, which, to be fair, he kind of did. He looked at our little parade with the kind of disdain that only cats can truly master. Slow blinked once, and went back to licking his paw. The silence that followed was the kind of heavy silence that happens when people realize they've made catastrophically stupid decisions. That, Valtrix said slowly, his weapon still raised, is not the specimen. Yeah, it is. I walked over to Carl and scratched behind his ears. He started purring louder, which made 3 members of the tactical team take a step back. Carl, meet the nice aliens who think you're a war crime with fur. Guys, meet Carl, who once got stuck in a paper bag for 20 minutes. Pip was frantically swiping through his datapad, his stick figure hands moving so fast they blurred. No, this can't be right. The specimen has distinctive markings, orange and white striping patterns, vertical slit pupils for enhanced low-light hunting, the exact body mass, and… He looked up at Carl, then back at his pad, then at Carl again. Oh my God. Yeah, there it is, I said. But this was catalogued as… Pip's voice was getting higher, more panicked. This was supposed to be an undocumented Terran predator, a new discovery. We found it at the Zirion veterinary intake during a routine processing of specimens from Earth transport vessels. And then it clicked for me. Wait, 3 months ago? You guys picked up a cat from the vet clinic? It was transferred with a batch of specimens for study, Pip said weakly. The intake forms listed it as an unclassified predator native to Earth's agricultural regions. There was a note that it had been sedated for transport due to aggressive behavior. I laughed. Couldn't help it. Let me guess. The vet had tagged him for his annual shots, and he got pissy about it? The facility veterinarian noted extreme resistance to handling. Valtrix read from his own data device. his voice getting quieter with every word. Subject demonstrated rapid deployment of keratinous weapons when approached. Multiple staff injuries during initial containment. Subject refused all food and attempted escape 17 times in the first week. Yeah, that's Carl. I picked him up, and he immediately went limp in that boneless way cats do when they're comfortable. He hates the vet, always has, and he's picky about food. Won't eat anything but the cheap stuff from the feed store. Trust me, I tried fancy cat food once. He knocked it off the porch and then threw up in my boot. Carl chose that exact moment to yawn, showing off all his teeth, and I swear I heard someone's weapon charging up. Stand down, Valtrix said tiredly. Everyone, stand down. But Commander, one of the team members protested. The clause. The audio file clearly stated. The audio file, I interrupted, is literally just him purring. That's what cats do when they're happy. The claws? I squeezed Carl's paw gently, and sure enough, his claws extended. Little curved things, maybe half a centimeter long. Retractable, yeah. For climbing and catching mice. The night vision? That's just how cat eyes work. They're built for hunting at dawn and dusk. Pip had sat down on the ground, his data pad forgotten in his lap. He looked like his entire worldview had just collapsed, which, to be fair, it kind of had. We evacuated 3 research stations. We issued a code black alert across 17,000 systems. We authorized military intervention and emergency protocols. For a barn cat. Well, I said, scratching Carl under the chin while he purred loud enough to rattle the windows. To be fair, he is a pretty intimidating barn cat. One time he brought me a rat that was almost as big as he was. Dropped it right on my porch like he was paying rent. Valtrix holstered his weapon with the kind of deliberate care that suggested he was rethinking his entire career path. How? He said, each word coming out like he was chewing glass. Did your barn cat escape from a maximum security facility? Oh, that's easy, I said. You left a door open, didn't you? The look on Pip's face told me I'd nailed it. The ventilation shaft, Pip whispered. We thought it was too small for the specimen to access. But cats, they can fit through any space their head can fit through. It's the lack of a rigid collarbone. They're essentially liquid. Yep. I set Carl back down on his hay bale throne. He probably just squeezed through, hopped a few fences, hitched a ride on a supply transport, and made his way home. Cats have been known to travel hundreds of miles to get back to familiar territory. It's called homing instinct, Carl meowed, short and demanding, because apparently all this attention meant he was owed dinner early. Right, Valtrix said. So, to summarize, the galaxy's most wanted predator is actually a domesticated Terran companion animal that weighs less than a standard-issue ration pack. His name is Carl, I corrected. And, yeah, pretty much. You'd think that would be the end of it. Reasonable people would apologize, maybe laugh it off, and head home. But we're talking about a military commander who'd just mobilized 3 star systems over a house cat, and Reasonable had left the building about the same time Carl had left the facility. I need to file a report, Valtrix said, and his scales were doing that color-shifting thing again, flickering between green and what I was pretty sure was embarrassed orange. Pip, scan the creature. Verify its identity against the specimen records. Commander, I really don't think that's an order. Pip pulled out what looked like a handheld scanner, the kind that probably cost more than my entire tractor, and approached Carl like he was defusing a bomb. Carl, for his part, was now grooming himself. One leg stuck straight up in the air in that position that looks physically impossible and also deeply undignified. Mr. Carl, Pip said, which was adorable in a pathetic sort of way. I need to just, if you could hold still for... Carl stopped mid-lick and stared at Pip with those big green eyes. You know the look, the one that says, I'm thinking about chaos, and I might just do it. Nice kitty. Pip tried. Good kitty. Just need to... Carl bolted. Not away, mind you, because that would be too simple. No, he launched himself directly at Pip, who screamed and dropped the scanner. Carl bounced off Pip's chest, hit the ground, and proceeded to zoom around the barn in that thing cat owners call the zoomies, and that the Galactic Emergency Response Division was apparently interpreting as aggressive, evasive maneuvers. Target is mobile, one of the team members shouted, actually shouted, and 3 grown aliens in military armor scrambled backward as a 7-pound cat ran figure-8s around the hay bales. He's just playing, I said, but nobody was listening to me anymore. Carl jumped onto a shelf, knocking over a can of nails that hit the ground with a crash that made everyone flinch. Then he did that thing cats do where they puff up their tail and go sideways, bouncing on stiff legs. which is hilarious when you know it's just play behavior and apparently terrifying if you think you're dealing with an apex predator. Defensive posture, Valtrix barked. Spread. Out! Don't let it flank us! It's a cat, I said, louder this time. He's playing. Carl, come here, buddy. But Carl was in full chaos mode now. He'd discovered that the tactical team made excellent moving targets, and he was doing that thing where he'd crouch, wiggle his butt, and then pounce at their feet. Every time he did it, at least 2 aliens would jump back, weapons tracking his movement like he was a fighter jet instead of a fuzzy idiot with 4 working brain cells. One team member, a gelatinous-looking alien whose name I never caught, tried to back away from Carl and tripped over a bucket. Went down hard, their weapons skittering across the barn floor. Carl, naturally, saw something sliding across the ground and immediately thought, toy, because that's how cats work. He pounced on the weapon, all 4 paws wrapping around it, and started doing that bunny kick thing with his back legs. He's disarmed Jexel, someone yelled. The creature is armed. He's not armed, he's kicking a gun. I was trying not to laugh. I really was. But watching trained military personnel lose their minds over a barn cat was hitting my funny bone pretty hard. Pip had climbed on top of a workbench and was clinging to a support beam. The behavior patterns, he called down, his voice shaking. They matched the facility records, high energy bursts followed by rest periods, unpredictable movement patterns, territorial displays. That's just cat zoomies, I shouted back. It's normal. He'll crash in about 30 seconds and sleep for 4 hours. As if on cue, Carl's energy reserves hit empty. He stopped mid-zoom, looked around like he'd forgotten why he'd been running, and then hopped back onto his hay bale. Within seconds, he was curled up in a ball, tail wrapped around his nose, already falling asleep. The barn went dead silent except for Carl's purring, which had kicked back in at full volume. Is it? Valtrix said carefully. Unconscious? He's napping. I walked over and gently stroked Carl's head. He didn't even open his eyes, just purred louder. See? Totally harmless. Although, to be fair, I should probably thank you guys. This is the most exercise he's gotten in months. Pip slowly climbed down from the workbench, his datapad clutched to his chest like a security blanket. The energy expenditure. The sudden rest period. This is consistent with pursuit predator behavior, conserving energy between hunts. Or, I said slowly, like I was explaining physics to a toddler, and hear me out here, it's just how cats work. They're crepuscular hunters. Built for short bursts of energy, not endurance. A couple minutes of zooming around, then nap time. My grandma's cat does the same thing, and the most dangerous thing she's ever hunted is a dust bunny under the couch. Jexel had retrieved their weapon and was now giving Carl a look that suggested they were having a serious personal crisis. It attacked me. He thought your feet were toys. Look, I'm sorry about all this, but you guys literally broke into his house, waved weird devices at him, and acted like prey animals. What did you expect? Valtrix's scales had settled into a dull gray that I was pretty sure meant defeated. He looked at Carl, sleeping peacefully on his hay bale kingdom. Then he looked at his team, who were all variously recovering from being terrorized by something that weighed less than their helmets. Then he looked at me. We're going to need you to sign some forms, he said finally. Oh, I'm signing forms all right, I said, starting with a property damage claim for my soybean field and ending with hazard pay for Carl's emotional distress. Carl, who had never experienced emotional distress a day in his life, continued snoring. It took another 2 hours to sort out the paperwork, because apparently the Galactic Council runs on bureaucracy and denial in equal measure. Valtrix spent most of that time on his comm unit, and I could hear him trying to explain the situation to someone higher up the chain of command. A lot of, yes sir, and I understand sir, and the specimen was misidentified sir, in increasingly strained tones. Pip, meanwhile, had appointed himself Carl's official documenter. He'd pulled up a folding chair next to the hay bale and was taking notes on every single thing Carl did, which, since Carl was asleep, amounted to subject continues resting, written 17 different ways. You know, I said, bringing Pip a cup of coffee because the poor guy looked like he needed it. We have these things called the internet. You could have just looked up cats before declaring a galactic emergency. Pip took the coffee with shaking hands. Earth's data networks are restricted. Security protocols. We're only allowed to access pre-approved biological databases, and those focus on species that pose potential hazards to non-Terran life. Apparently cats were deemed non-threatening. Well, they got that one right at least. Did they though? Pip gestured at his datapad, which was still showing all of Carl's threat assessments from the facility. Mr. Pritchard, do you have any idea how many species in the galaxy have retractable claws? 3. Total, and 2 of them are extinct. Do you know how many species can see in near total darkness? 47 out of 11,000 cataloged sapient species. Cats have abilities that are genuinely rare and genuinely frightening if you've never encountered them before. I looked at Carl, who had rolled onto his back and was sleep-twitching, probably dreaming about that laser pointer I'd lost 6 months ago. Huh. Never thought about it like that. And the vocalizations. Pip pulled up an audio file. This purring sound. It's a frequency that induces calm in humans, yes? But to species without that evolutionary context, it registers as a subsonic threat display, like a predator idling before an attack. So basically, I said, you guys heard a cat purr and thought you were about to die. Yes. Pip took a long drink of his coffee. That's exactly what happened. I'm never going to live this down, am I? Probably not, no. Valtrix finally finished his call and walked back over, looking like he'd aged about 10 years in the last 3 hours. The council has agreed to classify this as an administrative error. The facility's intake protocols are being reviewed. There will be an investigation into how a domesticated Earth animal was processed as an unknown predator. And my compensation? I asked, because I wasn't letting this go. Valtrix pulled out a data chip and handed it over with the expression of a man who just signed his own disciplinary report. 15,000 galactic credits for property damage. Another 5,000 for the distress caused. And a formal apology from the Galactic Council, which should arrive within the next standard week. I whistled. 20,000 credits would buy a new tractor and then some. Pleasure doing business with you, Commander. And the cat. Valtrix continued, his jaw tight. We'll need to update his registration. Currently, he's listed as Specimen Terra Omega 7. Status: extremely dangerous. I assume you'd like that changed. Yeah, let's go with Carl Pritchard. Status: lazy, but lovable. Pip typed something into his pad. Done. Although I am noting in the official record that while the specimen poses no threat to experienced handlers, first contact protocols with Terran felines should include proper education and preparation. You're writing a manual about cats, I said. Someone has to. Pip's voice cracked a little. Do you know there are 73 colonies in the expansion zone? 73 stations that might have humans and their companion animals? We can't have another incident like this. What if next time it's one of your dogs? I've seen the files on those. They have the bite force to crush bone. They also have the intelligence to bring you your slippers, I pointed out. Look, Pip, I appreciate the thoroughness. But maybe just start with, most Earth animals are harmless if you don't act like an idiot around them and go from there. Carl chose that moment to wake up, yawned so wide I could see all his teeth, and then hopped down from the hay bale. He walked directly to Valtrix, the being who'd led an armed task force to capture him, and started rubbing against his legs, purring like a motorboat. Valtrix looked down at Carl. Carl looked up at Valtrix. Then Carl flopped over and exposed his belly, which any cat owner knows is either an invitation for pets or an elaborate trap. 50-50 odds. Is this, Valtrix said slowly, a submission display? It's a trust display, I corrected. He's showing you he doesn't see you as a threat. You can pet him if you want, but watch out because he might be. Valtrix reached down to touch Carl's belly. Carl immediately grabbed his hand with all 4 paws and started bunny kicking, but gently, claws retracted. Playing, not hunting. Doing that, I finished. To his credit, Valtrix didn't jerk away. He just stood there, a highly decorated military commander, letting a barn cat kick his hand while his entire team watched. When Carl finally got bored and wandered off to find his food bowl, Valtrix straightened up and cleared his throat. Fascinating creature, he said diplomatically. He's all right, I agreed. Gets the job done. Haven't had a mouse problem since he moved in. The team packed up their gear after that, loading back into their ships with a lot less drama than when they'd arrived. Pip gave Carl one last scan for his records. Carl tolerated it in exchange for treats, and everyone seemed ready to pretend this had never happened. As Valtrix's ship lifted off, leaving fresh scorch marks next to the old ones, I stood there with Carl in my arms, watching them disappear into the atmosphere. You know, buddy, I said, scratching behind his ears, you probably just changed first. Contact protocols for the entire galaxy. That's pretty impressive for a guy who got stuck in a paper bag. Carl purred and headbutted my chin, which I took as agreement. My comm unit beeped. A message from the Galactic Council. Already. I opened it, expecting the formal apology Valtrix had mentioned. Instead, it was a request form. Apparently, 3 other agricultural colonies had just reported unidentified predators in their barns, And could I please assist in identification and assessment? Standard consulting fees apply. I looked at Carl. Carl looked at me with those big innocent eyes that absolutely did not convey the chaos his species was apparently unleashing across the galaxy. You want to take a road trip? I asked him. Carl meowed, which I chose to interpret as yes. And that's how I became the galaxy's leading expert on why Earth animals aren't going to kill everyone. A job title I never wanted and a paycheck I absolutely did. Turns out, when you're the only human who can tell the difference between a deadly predator and a golden retriever who just wants to play fetch, you become real popular real fast. But that's a story for another time. Right now, I had irrigation to finish, and Carl had important napping to do. Priorities, you know. The galaxy would just have to survive without us for a while. I had a feeling they'd manage. After all, they'd survived Carl. And honestly, that was probably the worst it was ever going to get. Probably.